We're back halfway through. We're on to number 6. So I was reading kind of what you put out there, Christian, in terms of like your philosophy or your thoughts around programming. And one of those was discussing individuals' previous experiences with strengthening, athletics, etc. Why do you feel like that's so important when you're going to make a program for someone?
I think the single most important thing, being a physical therapist or a coach, or really anyone trying to interact with another person, is knowing where they're coming from. You need to know what their past experiences are in order for you to be able to create the best chances of success. So something I like to figure out is, how active have you been in the past? What's your experience of, of course, youth athletics, recent athletics? But that stuff's important, but I actually think the most important thing around that is going to be the recency of those experiences, because when you think about the physical stress theory, you're really only as good as what you've done lately, or classic use it or lose it. If you have not been training in a certain way for a long time, I know you have this muscle memory and you have this mental framework for how it might have felt, but you're just not there anymore. And other previous experience helps us assume or just know a lot about you to create that better plan. Things I also like to look for are going to be mental and physical hardiness. So how much hard training have you done in the past? What's your experience? What are some of your physical accomplishments? Just so I get a sense of just where you are entering this training phase of your life. Movement competence is important to know, and we know that generally previous athletes have better motor patterns. They have better balance, better control. They're generally more experienced at moving their bodies in different ways, so they can usually handle certain exercises earlier on with fewer hiccups. Sure, you're going to still build them up appropriately, but you can probably choose higher level things earlier because they're just going to be more competent with movement there.
Yeah.
I like to get to know people's motivation as well. A lot of folks who are entering the training space, or they're newer to it, their first time, they might be really highly motivated before they begin, but once they start getting their hands dirty, they're like, oh, this is what training is like. This is a grind. This kind of sucks. You got to get to know that about the person so you can tailor your plan to be less sucky and be more approachable. But if someone they're used to the grind and they kind of like it, great. I know that about you. I'm going to hit you with higher stuff from the start, or I'm going to build you up to it much faster, and I know it's going to work for you.
Yeah.
Preferences are really important when thinking about someone and their programming, because you want to know what they like and what they dislike. I don't care how good of a plan you wrote. If the person doesn't like the stuff that you wrote, they're not going to do it. Doesn't matter. So
Absolutely.
You have to make sure you're factoring in their preferences, and that can be any number of things. That can be preferences on types of movements they do, equipment they use, time of day they train, what gym do they go to. It's just, there's so many different things you got to think about, and all that goes into consideration.
Yeah.
And I also like to think about good and bad experiences. So for good experiences, some questions I'll think about are, what did you really like about your last gym or your last trainer? What movements are really fun for you? How often do you like things to change to keep things more fun and engaging for you? Thinking about some bad experiences was, did you ever get hurt from working with a trainer that pushed you too hard too fast? Was there a cultural issue at your last gym that just wasn't a good experience for you? Like maybe you're a pretty hardworking athlete, but you're training at Planet Fitness and you can't touch a heavy weight without getting looked at. Like that's probably not the place for you.
Right.
Was your last formal plan too rigid, and you felt inadequacy or shame by not being able to do it as written? These are all really important things to make sure that people are going to be set up to have a better experience with the plan. And the reason that's all important is so that we can keep you more engaged, more consistent, get better gains, get better outcomes. All these important for those considerations.
I couldn't agree more with those different points. All those points are so important. I see a lot of like athletes or like people who were athletes and they come into PT. And like if I give them someone I would like exercises I would give a 85-year-old grandma, they're going to be like, what are you giving me? It's like, this is too easy. I'm not getting pushed enough, or I'm not feel like I'm making the gains I want to make, whatever it is. So like you have to know that about your client or patient, whoever it is, so that they stay interested, they stay, motivated, they're having fun with it, etc. And all of that is just piling on what you said there, Christian.
Even if you have a 40-year-old ex-D1 athlete who is definitely out of shape and they probably need the same plan as your 80-year-old person in that example, you're not going to write it the same.
Yeah.
You might give them overall the same kind of work, but you're gonna spice it up a little bit for that 40-year-old. You're gonna make it a bit more fun, more engaging somehow, so they feel like they're training in a way that's consistent with their mental image of how they should be training. And that's also part of the art of programming, is just making the program feel the way the person wants it to feel.
Yep. Exactly. Next, keep moving on here. So I really like this one because in undergrad, we hammered the shit out of this. And I can't wait to hear your response. So, question number 7. Do you try to, quote, balance out push-pull days for upper strengthening so that we're not overworking the pushing exercises? Because there's this idea that if you do 4 days of bench press and then you only do 1 day of horizontal pulling, then you're going to get what's called like an upper cross syndrome, or you're going to have postural faults, however you want to phrase it. Christian, do you ever worry about that? Do you ever try and balance out your push-pull days for upper extremity?
Yes and no. So, yes, for beginners and for people who fall under the category of GPP, which is general physical preparedness, folks have specific physique goals. They want a more balanced physique. I might try to keep things fairly balanced. Or they have past or current injuries. Let's say it's a rotator cuff. I'm definitely going to encourage some more pulling type movements to make sure we're getting that area a bit more targeted. So I think about the whole balancing, pushing and pulling as a way to build general movement competence. You're exposing them to a lot of different stressors, different patterns of movement. Help them also, for a beginner especially, help them find what they like. They got to try a bunch of stuff to figure out what they like, what they don't like. And so thinking about balancing out push and pull is a great way to force them to try different things. And also, if they are a beginner, if you hyper specialize way too soon, you're going to miss out on a lot of not only athletic development, but physique development. If you're new to training, you should be training all the things as much as you can get away with, because that first year or whatever it is of newbie gains, you're going to make a ton of progress. You're going to feel amazing. And if you just like only bench pressed, probably not the best use of your time. You could be just getting yoked all over for that first year. And so I like to make sure people have a well-balanced plan when they're new for all those reasons. Now, I don't really care much about balancing out a plan with pushing and pulling for people that are more well-trained, people that are more specific in their training, such as power lifters, Olympic weightlifters, or even GPP folks that want to focus on certain areas of their body. They want more or less a well-rounded program, but they also want to get their bench up. Well, fine, I'm probably going to spend more of the time on your bench, less of the time on your pulling. You're definitely going to have a greater amount of pushing over pulling. And then, or if they don't really have any injury or pain, I'm not going to care too much about trying to get that rotator cuff in that previous example. And then also thinking about intermediate to advanced lifters, they are working really hard relatively for their body. They're now probably pushing those 8 RPEs. They're in that higher percent of their 1 rep max. They probably need a bit more volume than a beginner does because they're more well trained. And that all takes effort and it all takes time. And if those are constraints, you need to make sure you're focusing your efforts where that person needs it. And if they're advanced or trying to push their bench press and their back is already pretty damn good, I'm not going to put a bunch of extra pulling back work in there, because that's going to sap their time and energy that could otherwise be going towards their bench goal. And then also there's motivation too. Not every advanced or even intermediate lifter is going to want to or will have the same level of motivation for all the movements all time. They're probably going to start to have preferences based on their goals, and you want to make sure that you're sensitive to those. Okay, so I also will say no to this question of balancing, pushing, and pulling when we think about how to continuously progress a client over time. With these more intermediate to advanced lifters, you cannot push progression in all fronts all the time. I can't, for a powerlifter, for example, I can't push your squat, bench, and deadlift at the same rate continuously forever. At some point, you're going to have to put something on maintenance where you're just trying to keep it where it's at so you can focus more of those resources on other areas. And you'll just start to flip-flop where you're or what's going on maintenance and what's being progressed. And so I care way less about balancing when I have those extra considerations to make for a more advanced trainer. And then just in general, why did I say yes and no to this question? What are my overall thoughts on this upper cross type syndrome thing? I'm not going to get too heated here. I'll just be simple with it. I don't believe that doing too much pushing inherently leads to you being more rounded forward. That's like saying too much deadlifting is going to make you like all swayed back and just hyperextended all the time, all day. It's just not a thing. Not a thing that happens. And so unless you have osteoporosis or Scheuermann's kyphosis or some other kind of genetic abnormality of your spine that forces your spine to be more rounded forward, being rounded forward is more of a choice. It's a result of you choosing, whether it's knowingly or unknowingly, to not ensure that you're moving your joints in all the ways that they can move, that you're able to preserve that more straight upper back posture. You need to spend time in those positions throughout your day to make sure you can maintain it. And you can certainly maintain it by benching a lot and not doing a whole lot of pulling, just by the way you carry yourself throughout your day.
Nice. Yeah. Admittedly, I put that on there because I wanted to see if you would get triggered by it and we could get a good old Christian rant on
No rant
on
today.
upper
I think that was a polite rant.
That was very good. Spoken like a true PT. Yes and no. Very nice.
But that is, I will say that the upper cross, lower cross type syndrome, or like balancing, what do we call it? When I first started working, it was a really big thing, and I did believe it for a long time. I think I was told, and I programmed for people that you wanted to have a 2-to-1 ratio, pulling to pushing. You wanted 2 times more pulling than you did pushing. That's a pretty classic way to think about things. It is not true. So when you hear that kind of language, it's coming from someone who is probably new in their career, and they just have a lot more to learn about this stuff. Or they're really dogmatic and they're wrong. You shouldn't work with them.
Man, I love it. Bam. Heard it here first. No, yeah, that was good. That was good. I would agree. It's a yes and no. There's many more variables that play into it. Like you said, they could have some inherent stuff going on at the spine that might play into why you wouldn't want to do too many pushing exercises. I don't know. At some point in the day, we all sit in an upper cross syndrome, I guess, however you want to break that down and look at it. Like, it changes. It changes throughout time, no matter, like, what you're doing during the day, how you're moving, how you're sitting, etc. And I tell patients, like, hey, if you're sitting in a posture, you could probably, look, you can see my freaking shoulders popping out right now. I'm not that yoked. It's just how I'm sitting. And guess what? I'm going to be fine. I don't have to worry about an upper cross syndrome. But in that aspect, if there is specific goals that we want to look at, and then, yeah, maybe we program push-pull days in a certain way. So, no, yeah, very good answer there. All right, so when programming, I'll let you kind of set the stage here, but why would we do things such as power or higher strength output exercises first and end with things like what we might call like the fluff or not so intense exercises? Why do we start with the hard stuff first and end with the easier stuff?
Yeah, I think you got the fluff thing from the document that I'm working on.
I never called it that before, but now I'm going to start calling it.
I'll probably change it, but I'm working on an intro to programming for one of my coworkers to help her learn how to program and pretty much just write down everything that I've learned over years and then add some sources. And in the creation of this document, I'm trying to figure out how I would like to express the idea of exercise selection and exercise order and creating a tier list. And there really is a tier list. If you're trying to optimize, I'll say that. If you want to optimize your performance, there's definitely a tier list of things to do. There's an order to things. And I think a simple way to think about it is going to be three major things. One, the list of, or the order that you have comes down to what energy substrates you're using, your neuromuscular efficiency, and then overall fatigue, whether that's going to be mental, emotional, and physical, which kind of ties into the energy substrates and neuromuscular efficiency thing, but fatigue is a big one. So when you think about energy substrates, you have creatine phosphate, you have glycogen or sugars, carbs, and then you also have fats. Your creatine phosphate is needed for your very fast and forceful movements, and you don't have a lot of it, and it depletes very quickly. And so you want to try to do the movements that are going to best use creatine phosphate earlier in the plan so you aren't using it on other things later on that probably don't need it as much. And so things that are going to use creatine phosphate more are going to be more of your power and your low rep strength movements. So you think about creatine when it comes to timing of exercises. And then there's also muscle glycogen. As your body burns through muscle glycogen to power your muscles and your stores in your muscles begin to deplete, you feel fatigue. Fatigue is your body's way of telling you that, hey, I'm running low on energy substrates to power you and generate this movement. I'm letting you know so you can start to chill out so we can eat, we can refuel. Don't take me too close to red line because I need to make sure you live. So that's just the warning system telling you you're getting close. And as you fatigue, your body also, without you knowing, it makes you perform worse. So you want to try to do the harder, more skillful, more important movements earlier in your workout plan or your workout for that day, because if you start to dip too low in your glycogen stores, you're going to get less performance out of them. Now, when thinking about it from a neuromuscular standpoint, just like muscles, your nerves, your brain, and the signals from your nerves to your muscles get fatigued over time. The more you use them, especially with high intent and high effort, they begin to poop out. And so their ability to do their job worsens over time as a workout goes by, as you get more fatigued. And so there's a lot of neuromuscular considerations like your motor unit recruitment, your rate of force development, your rate coding, and your muscle receptor sensitivity that we think about with exercise selection. So you want to use or you want to prioritize the movements that require more neuromuscular efficiency earlier in the workout. And that's going to be high power, so high force production, hard, heavy strength, where you really, really want your nervous system firing on all cylinders to make your muscles do the job as best they can. And it's also going to be your high skill work. So high technical work, that's going to be things like snatch, clean and jerk, just your more technical movements that will be used with load or done with load. So that's substrates, neuromuscular, and then fatigue. I already talked about physical fatigue and why that matters, but there's also mental and emotional. When you're doing an hour-long workout, by minute 45, there's no way your motivation is as high as when you started. And that means you are going to put less effort, whether it's purposely or just subconsciously, into whatever movement you're doing at minute 45 versus minute 1. And so you try to prioritize the most important movements or the ones that are most pertinent towards your goals earlier in the workout to make sure that you're maximizing that fatigue, at least the thought about fatigue. So they're as fresh as they can be. They can put more of that mental energy towards the movement. That's going to help you perform better. Again, all this stuff is all about optimizing. You can put stuff wherever you want and probably still make good benefits, especially as a beginner to intermediate. But when we're working with clients, we think about these things to make sure that you are getting the most out of your training. So do you need to think about this stuff in the way that I am? Like I said, no. I will sometimes move power, for example, which should be early on, to later in the program once the client's more warmed up. perhaps they have sore ankle, sore knee, and we want to get those tissues more warmed up before you begin to add faster rate of force development. Sure, their performance is going to be a little bit less, but I don't really care about that right now. I care about them doing the movements and feeling pretty good about it. We can worry about performance later after they feel better doing it. Mm-hmm. Also, sometimes people have goals that are more towards the hypertrophy and less towards strength. And so let's say they want to do back squats and get stronger, but they actually care more about their shoulder development. Okay, fine. I'm going to put shoulder stuff earlier before the heavy back squat, even though isolated shoulder work isn't as taxing on the body as the squats. And typically I'd want the squats sooner. I don't really care because it's going to be their goal. And if that's what they want, I'm going to put that first. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put a little bit more of the energy into the shoulders to help them reach their goal.
No, it all makes sense. I know there's some bigger jargon in there, like neuromuscular and, talking about different substrates and whatnot, but it's all important stuff. And, it's really just different ways of talking about like communication, right? How the body communicates with one another, how the nerves communicate with the muscles and so on. It's all important stuff. And in order to program that correctly, if you spend a lot of that time and energy on things that don't need that much time and energy, and then by the time you get to the end of the workout, it might be tough to hit that 4 sets of 5 on back squat or whatever it is. And then what I was thinking of too, like when you're talking about like minute 45, when it hits 45 minutes, I'm sitting there thinking, man, that sauna sounds pretty nice right now. Like, I might skip out on an extra set of quad extensions or something, I might scurry down to that sauna a little bit sooner. Just because like at the beginning of the workout, like I said, dude, we got Green Day pumping in the headphones. We're ready to go.
Green Day?
You want to listen
totally
to Green Day? What are you talking about, dude? Black Parade all day. Blast it in my headphones. Also, we should do a count on how many times I've used the phrase blast it in my headphones. It's probably at like 5 or something right now.
That'll be a future drinking game.
Right? But no, the point is that when you're at the beginning of the workout, your motivation, emotional stress, etc., like all that stuff is primed and ready to go. And by the time you get towards the end, it starts to dip a little bit, even in high level trained individuals, right? It's just kind of a natural thing. But anyways, so we got a couple more questions to go. Next one is just, how would you describe RPE? I mean, we've talked about that before. What the hell is it? And how can we portray this to the layperson out there listening to this?
So there are several ways that we try to describe how much weight to use or your load. The standard is going to be using a percentage of your 1 rep max, but then the problem with using a percentage of your 1 rep max, let's say it's 70%, is that you might not always know it because you haven't tested it truly, or you've only done a 5 rep max and you did some calculation to roughly get to your 1 rep max, which is called your estimated 1 rep max. It just gets a little bit muddy. And then also, if you've ever trained seriously, you'll know that if you do some calculations on a program that you bought, you're using someone else's, or you made it yourself, and the day asks for you to hit 80% of your 1RM, but you slept like crap, maybe you had a couple beers the night before, maybe you're in week 6 of an 8-week program and you're beat to shit. When your program asks for you to hit 80% and you look at that number, you're like, no, that's not happening.
You can go right
So the problem with percentage calculations is they do not factor in the rest of you. They just look at what is this number compared to your absolute best, but where are you right now? Where are you today? That's where we use what's called autoregulation. And there are 2 major ways that we use autoregulation. One is rating of perceived exertion, or RPE, and the other is reps in reserve, or RIR. So rating of perceived exertion and RIR are ways for us to account for the total stress that you're feeling, not just the physical, but also the mental, also the emotional. How fed are you? What kind of food have you been eating? Are you stressed from work? All these things factor into an overall feeling that you have. And so, to answer your question, Eric, RPE is a 0 to 10 scale. A simple way to say it is just, how hard does this feel to you? 0 to 10. So 0 is probably you right now, Eric, sitting on your ass. I'm probably at like a 2 because talking is taking a lot of breath, and this is kind of effortful after a long period of time.
I'm just chilling. I'm just
Dude, you're just
enjoying it.
chilling.
Yeah.
10 is going to be your hardest effort possible. You can't do another rep. Uh, I'm literally working as hard as I can, or I feel that I can safely, and any harder is impossible or dangerous. That's kind of your 10. And again, this is a feeling scale. And so maybe your plan calls for you to hit a 70% of your 1 rep max, which would roughly equate to a 7 RPE. But you're like, damn, I really do not have it in me today for whatever reason. I think I'm going to be able to do a 6 at most. Or maybe it's a great day and you just freaking go to an 8 RPE because you're killing it. Whatever it is, autoregulation allows us to, over time, as you become more acquainted with it, better prescribe load for you on a day-to-day basis. And it just leads to more gains over time when done earnestly and honestly.
Yeah, and everything you said there, like that's stuff that they don't necessarily teach in school, I think. When we talk about percent max and talking about it's time to hit 305 and you're sitting there thinking, man, I just got off of a hard 10-hour day, not hitting 305. And it's like, well, maybe your 80% for that day is 285. Right. And then you can scale it from there. So yeah, no, it's a really, really good example to use. I think a lot of people connect with that because not everyone is primed and ready to go every single day. It's just not how life works.
Yeah, and to use your example, when you're thinking about how to best optimize a client's potential gains, if you make that person after a 10-hour day and they're feeling burnt, if you try to make them hit that 305, that's supposed to be an 80%, but maybe it's like a 90 or 95. You're now incurring way too much of a fatigue burden because your body doesn't really care about the physical stress alone. It also cares about the total stress that you're experiencing as a person, and that has to be factored in for you to get the best potential gains. And so by lowering the weight to 285, I think you said, you're still training your body at roughly an 8 RPE or 80% that it can do that day, and you're probably going to get better gains overall because you're not incurring such a heavy fatigue burden, which is going to make you perform worse much more rapidly over time.
Yeah. The brain doesn't know emotional stress, physical stress, social stress. The brain just knows stress, right? I think this is the point of like talking about people who try and just like push through everything, right? Like if it's like, I had a long day at work, I don't want to work out, but it's like, F it, man, we're going to do it anyways. We're going to get after it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, hey, your body's telling you something. And it's telling you that you had a hard day. And that hard day, it doesn't know the difference between, work stress versus this weight stress you're about to do. And I'm not trying to like use that as like an excuse for like people like get out of not, getting after it in a program. But it's just, I think it's reality and we don't often really talk or think about that.
Yeah, and it's also, I think about it as someone who's trying to help people reach their goals in that if I'm prescribing workouts that you can't do because you don't have the mental capacity right now or the energy, and you skip them, that's not helpful.
It's worse than
if
just
I was
doing
clear
less.
with you in the beginning that, hey, I might have prescribed this thing, but if you're feeling like crap that day, it's fine for you to make it a little bit easier. I'd rather you make it easier and do it because that's still going to lead to benefit than you not do it at all.
Yep, couldn't agree more. All right, question number 10. Rest times. Talking about rest times. I heard someone online in a video, a strength coach talked about their rest times is basically when do you have your normal like breath back, right? Like if you do a hard set of back squat and it's 2 minutes after and you can still kind of feel yourself laboring to breathe a little bit, give your body a little bit more time before you get under the bar again. But like if you did some back squats and after 30 seconds you're ready to go, and then, they would argue you're ready to go. And so that's kind of one way to think about it. But Christian, for you, are rest times like are they important and how do they vary from like harder exercises to easier exercises?
My overall thought is that rest times aren't that important. When you look at all the different evidence we have on them, Whether you rest 2 minutes or you rest 5 minutes, whether it's a strength exercise or hypertrophy, you're getting about the same outcomes. Yes, you can get a little bit more refined and say, yeah, you might get 1 or 2% more benefit here or there based on this rest time or whatever. But by and large, if you rest an appropriate amount to where you feel like you are ready for the next set, whether that's in 2 to 5 minutes, that's probably all the rest that you need. Your example of that coach saying, if you get your breath back and you're ready to go in 30 seconds, you're ready to go. I don't agree with that in the context of traditional strength training or hypertrophy training. Let's say you're doing 3 sets of 10, and you're supposed to be hitting a 7 or 8 RPE on that set of 10. If you are ready to go to your second set within 30 seconds or a minute, you are not going heavy enough. I will tell you right now, there is zero chance that you went heavy enough. You should not be that recovered that quickly. You probably are leaving a lot in the tank. You're sandbagging it, or maybe you're just new and you don't quite know what hard training is like. That's just when you have a really short rest break and you feel ready to go, you're just not working hard enough, and you're leaving gains on the table there. So I think in general, you should aim to have about a 2 to 5 minute rest. I think 3 is a pretty good sweet spot if you want a general rule. When it comes to strength training, you definitely want to have your breath back. Let's say it's a back squat. You want to have your breath back between sets, but also going back to the RPE conversation, you need to have your mental faculties back. If you're at minute 2 and maybe you have your breath back, but you're like, I don't know. I don't have my head right yet. I don't want to touch this bar yet. You need an extra moment to just regroup. You should probably take that moment. You're probably going to get better gains if you allow your the mental side of things to recover. Because that's kind of a proxy for your neuromuscular efficiency. If you feel like you don't have it yet, even if you have your breath back or your muscles aren't really that sore, if the idea of doing that next set is daunting, you don't feel quite ready to do it, you're probably not ready neuromuscularly. And so I think giving yourself an extra 30 seconds to a minute is probably going to be just fine. You can rest up to 5 minutes if you want for strength. Even hypertrophy is totally fine. But who the hell has time for that? So that's where I'm just like, dude, 2 to 3 minutes. That's kind of my sweet spot, my goal. And you should be good to go there. But then also, last thing I want to say about this is there are 3 major things that will contribute to how much rest you need. There are probably more, but 3 that I thought of. One is how many muscles are used in this movement. If it's a bicep curl, even if you're training really, really close to failure, you probably don't need nearly as much rest as doing a deadlift or a back squat that's trained to a similar difficulty level, because just the sheer amount of muscle used in a deadlift or a squat is far greater than a bicep curl. That means you've burned through more energy substrates for neuromuscular efficiency as well as the actual force production. And that just takes more time to recover from. And then also, how large are those muscles? A bicep curl is going to be faster to recover from than a quad extension or a hamstring curl, just because the leg muscle is much bigger. For everything I said before, they will take a little bit more time probably than a bicep. And then how close to failure are you training? If you're training at 60% or 6 RPE, you are probably going to be good to go pretty soon, maybe closer to 2 minutes. If you're training at 9 or absolute failure, you might want more time to truly, fully recover. So I guess the big takeaway from this is rest times don't matter a whole lot. I usually think about them in terms of how do I make this program fit into someone's time constraint at the gym. Maybe they only have an hour, but they want to get XYZ done. I got to make sure that this thing's flowing pretty well for them. And that's where rest times are used to really control the flow. Or, maybe I got to have someone is working way too quickly. I know they're underloading. I'm going to force them to take longer rest breaks so that they need to put more weight on the bar to get the same level of effort. And so that's just like a little trickery I'll do for some people.
Right. Yeah. A lot of proxies. A lot of proxies today. I like it. But no, yeah. So you mentioned the word flow a couple of times there, and that leads nicely into the next question. So very well done.
Yep.
So then how would you describe, like, what is a good flow to an exercise?
So for your workout, we're trying to create an experience. We're trying to create a fun, engaging experience that is going to be consistent with your goals, your preferences, and your barriers. And so flow is just our way of saying, like, we're just putting all that stuff together into a workout for you that's going to do all that. Uh, I think flow is based on several things. I know I said client goals and preferences, but also flow is a stylistic choice from the coach. We all coaches come at programming with our own unique experiences, the things that we've personally trained, the materials that we've read, and just our biases. And so there are certain things that I like to do with all my clients because I think they work really well, and that's just sort of how I like to do things. That's a stylistic choice. There are lots of ways to do it, as everyone already knows. With bodybuilding, for example, there are so many different schools of thought on how to get jacked, and they all work. So you just pick your style. There's also, when thinking about flow, you got to think about equipment access. So if someone's at a big Globo gym and they have every tool ever, well, damn, I can have a lot of fun with this person. We can do a lot of cool things. So how do we flow across the gym, uh, from barbell to dumbbell to machine? But what if they don't have much equipment? I got to think about that. How are we going to make this be pretty fun with the limited tools that they have? And there's also gym culture. So in a perfect world, I could have someone bring dumbbells to a machine, and they could superset a machine thing with a dumbbell thing. But gym culture might say, no, you can't take dumbbells out of this area. So I have to factor that into someone's plan
Right.
that that sort of constrains how I go about creating this flow for a person.
Mm-hmm.
I also have general rules of thumb that kind of go back to our conversation on the different parameters around strength, hypertrophy, endurance, etc. I'm going to put the more important stuff earlier in the program. I want to make sure that we are using your energy substrates really appropriately, neuromuscular efficiency considerations are made, your fatigue is factored in. So more important stuff is done early. Compound movements are done early for similar reasons. Small muscles are generally done later. So I'll try to put bicep curls in the middle to the end, for example, or lateral delt raises, just because they can handle that work later. I can still get a great hypertrophy response with lower volume, or like lower load, by changing the overall volume that the muscle gets. And then I'll generally put free weights earlier than machines, and that's because of the coordination aspects. There's more coordination needed for a barbell or even a dumbbell than there is a machine, and I want you fresher for the higher level coordination tasks so that you don't get hurt and you can get the most out of them. Machines can certainly come later without a problem. And so there is a bit of a rough ranking when you put all those things together, a rough ranking in how I like to coordinate things. And this is pretty standard in strength and conditioning. You're going to put your power or your high skill or technical needs first, ideally. That's your jumping, your landing, your throwing, and your technical lifts like a snatch and clean and jerk, for example. Then you're going to move down into your primary strength goal. That could be your back squat, deadlift, bench press. Then after that, you're going to focus on more of your other strength and hypertrophy goals that can kind of mix in wherever you want. Maybe you'll still have a little bit of a hierarchy depending on the client's goals or needs. And then at the very end, I'll put in that way less important strength hypertrophy work. Maybe that's where you do some core work, you throw in the calves. So
Yeah.
that's the general way I will approach a flow for a person's plan.
Yeah. No, I like it. And I also, something I thought of too was, how busy is the gym, right? Where I go, so I just go to the local YMCA. And like, if you go at the right time, it's like, good luck trying to get what you think you want, unless you want to wait around for a while. And so I think there's also part of that too, is like, all right, free weights, kettlebell, dumbbell, barbell. you're going to it's going to be a hard day to find where all three of those are taken, right? Or bands or body weight, whatever it is. Like if you're like, I want you to do a machine, that machine might be taken up and you got to kind of go on the fly, right? So, yeah, to that point too, it kind of depends on the gym culture, how busy it is, what's the setup like, what's the availability or the access, all that stuff plays into it. So most definitely. Now come to the final question.
Finally.
We got there. Between taking Willie out for bathroom breaks and a bunch of other stuff, we're at question 12. So, what are 3 takeaways that you want other people to know about when it comes to fitness programming? What are the top 3 things to focus on? Or if like someone's new to it, like what are going to be like your 3 main big hitters for them?
First one is, if you aren't, I would start now. I would start literally with anything, and you're going to learn as you go.
Mm.
When I first started strength training, I was 26, just out of PT school, and I started by using programs out of a book that my coworker had. And then I started buying programs from various companies, and I would do them for as long as I said. You know, some were 4 weeks, some were 8 weeks, some were 12 weeks, I did 16-week ones. You just got to start somewhere, and you'll learn as you go. You'll learn what you like, what you don't like, but pick a program, do the thing, do the whole thing, and start to figure out what you like. And there are some companies that I think are a great starting point. So there's apps like Caliber, Juggernaut AI, True Coach. They're going to have programs written by people that are, I don't know how good they all are, but just pick some. One that looks cool, start doing it. I think really good programs, if you like powerlifting, injury prevention, and bodybuilding, are going to be barbell medicine programs. I did many of theirs years ago, and they're highly effective. And honestly, I think a lot of my training style or programming style comes from the lessons I learned from those programs.
Mm.
And I cannot recommend those ones highly enough. I think fun ones are going to be Pen and Paper Strength app. Those are pretty sick. I like their programs. They're a little silly. They're kind of stupid and bad in a lot of ways. They're just not good for a beginner. And even an intermediate lifter, like you're going to be in the gym for an hour and a half, 2 hours on some of those. But they're fun. They're fun and silly. And if you do most of it, you're going to be just fine.
Yep.
I think a classic way to start is going to be, and this is, I think the first thing I did was I did Jim Wendler's 531 programs. I just started doing those for powerlifting style stuff, a little bit of hypertrophy. And that gave me 531 is a framework of how to approach your training. And I think if you can start dabbling in these different frameworks, you're going to go a long way. So start now with anything, just go. And then if you want a little bit more specific help, this is where I would talk to myself or Eric about our Flex Metal coaching offerings. We're happy to help you start somewhere.
Heck yeah.
Even if you are more advanced, we're happy to help you too. Next thing I wanted to say was, if the stuff you're doing now isn't falling in line fairly closely with what we talked about on this podcast, it can probably be better. I'm not here to say that we are the world's best coaches. We're certainly not. But we know enough, and we've done this enough for years to know how to get results. And if what you're doing isn't roughly like what we're talking about, it probably should be, and you can do better if you want to optimize especially. Maybe you don't need to, but if you're anyone that really cares about truly getting results, I would say your plan should be falling in line with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing I would say is, if you're trying to figure out just, okay, how hard do I need to train to get results?
Mm.
I don't care about min-maxing. I just want to know what's a really simple benchmark for how much weight to use to know I'm getting the right stimulus. I'll stick with 3 sets of 10, just how much weight do I need to use? This is where I would say you should be training at a 6 to 8 RPE or a 2 to 4 reps in reserve as a very, very solid baseline. That is going to get you tons of great results with little to no downside at all. If you try to do that and you know that you have a lot of reps left in you when you get to the end of your set, or you hardly need rest in between your sets, you need to add more weight. You are just going through the motions. You're not really getting the stimulus that you need to get better.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to failure on everything, and you are just absolutely gassed and crushed, and maybe even you're having some aches and pains, you're probably going too hard. You're probably going at like a 9 or 10 RPE all the time, or a 0 to 1 rep in reserve. And you should probably pull back closer to that 6 to 8 range for RPE, and I bet you're going to get better results. So those are my 3 very important things to think about. We can always talk about more, but that's a good start.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it, man. It's all very solid things to start on, and it's not like super specific. It's kind of more generalized stuff, right? So a lot of those, part of those 3 points you gave, they're things that, you can kind of pull, you can break each one down. You can pull each one apart and get very specific with it. But like Christian said, when it comes to like very personalized training programs or getting started on the right foot, I wholeheartedly believe that you and I offer a great service. But like you said, we're not the world's best programming coaches, fitness people, whatever you want to call it, right? There are people out there that dedicate their entire freaking life to this stuff, and they're really good at it. And so if we're not your thing, we'd love to point you in the right direction to find whatever that thing is that you're looking for. So, no, like it. I thought that was a lot of great information. This is definitely going to be a 2-parter. Looking at the timestamp, we talked for quite a long time, but like I said, it was all really, really quality stuff. So thanks for that, Christian.
Yeah, no problem. And that's kind of your fault. You wrote 12 questions.
That's kind of my fault.
And they were all really good questions.
Yeah.
I think they were great.
Awesome. Well, thank you. All right, everyone. We already plugged our stuff, so nothing else to really plug going on from here on. So anything comes up, please reach out. But thanks again, Christian, and have a great rest of your day, man. See ya.